The Gospel according to Luke is the first of a two-volume work. It is unanimously attributed to Luke by the earliest church. The Gospel tells the story of Jesus from the announcement of his birth through his departure from the world. No word from Papias survives about Luke. An ancient prologue written for the Gospel says,
"Indeed, Luke was an Antiochian Syrian, a doctor by profession, a disciple of the apostles. Later, however, he followed Paul until his martyrdom, serving the Lord blamelessly. He never had a wife, he never fathered children, and died at the age of 84, full of the Holy Spirit in Boeotia."
Inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile a narrative of the things that have been accomplished among us, just as those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word have delivered them to us, it seemed good to me also, having followed all things closely for some time past, to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, that you may have certainty concerning the things you have been taught.
This is how Luke's Gospel begins. He says others have written Gospels before him. That is consistent with the evidence we've seen that Luke used Mark and Q as sources. Luke alludes to the eyewitnesses and ministers of the Word who stand behind the story of Jesus. His claim to have investigated the words and deeds of Jesus himself for some time past suggests that he was in contact with some of those eyewitnesses and ministers himself. Both the Gospel and the Acts of the Apostles are addressed to someone named Theophilus. While no one today can say with certainty who Theophilus was, some have proposed that he was Theophilus ben Ananus, high priest of Israel. Luke says nothing about himself, but one detail from his own writing in the Acts of the Apostles opens the door to discovering more about him. At 4 places in the Acts, we abruptly encounter the pronoun we. Despite failed attempts to explain this otherwise, the clear reason is this. At these 4 places in the narrative, Luke was actually present for what he reports. These we passages, as they are called, are based on Luke's own memories and perhaps his personal journal entries. We gather from this that Luke joined Paul at Troas. The they in the Acts narrative becomes we throughout their journey into Macedonia, including the conversion of Lydia at the Roman colony of Philippi. This means Luke was present when the gospel of Jesus Christ was proclaimed for the first time on the continent of Europe. The second we passage finds Luke with Paul, setting sail from Philippi and planning to meet a number of co-workers ahead at Troas. There at Troas, Luke was present for Paul's late-night message to the assembled believers when a young man named Eutychus fell asleep at the window and fell 3 stories to his death. Paul restored him to life. Luke went with Paul until reaching Miletus. Of still greater concern in our search for the story behind Luke's Gospel are the 3rd and 4th of the we passages. The 3rd relates the voyage from Miletus toward Jerusalem. Again, place names are related in order and lengths of stay, details as though coming from a journal. Luke was present when the ship reached the port city of Tyre in Phoenicia, where Christians were by now present to welcome Paul. They warned Paul in the Spirit not to go to Jerusalem. Farther down the coast, Paul's party arrived at the Roman capital of Syria, Caesarea. There Luke, with Paul, stayed in the home of Philip the evangelist for many days. Luke remained with Paul all the way to the holy city. The 3rd we passage makes this clear. Paul was arrested in Jerusalem following a riot. He appealed to Caesar to hear his case because he had that right as a Roman citizen. Paul was held in prison at Caesarea, awaiting extradition to Rome. No one could have known that the delay would be 2 years. In the fourth we passage, we find Luke with Paul on the voyage to Rome. Luke was present when the ship was caught in a storm and wrecked on the beach at the island of Malta. So Luke arrived in the land of Israel with Paul, and left again 2 years later with Paul. But he was not in prison as was Paul. Where was Luke? What was he doing? Luke remained in the land of Israel, waiting to accompany Paul to Rome. There he would have met with Christians. During this time, he may well have met some of the people he names in his gospel. Perhaps Zacchaeus, the women who discovered Jesus' empty tomb, or the 2 disciples who met the risen Jesus on the Emmaus Road. Luke would have learned firsthand from eyewitnesses and ministers of the Word what he would later write in his gospel. As Luke told the story of Jesus, he provided particular emphases. All 4 gospel writers tell of the Holy Spirit. Luke emphasizes the Holy Spirit. The activity of the Spirit in Jesus' work becomes the pattern for the Spirit's work in the church that follows. Luke emphasizes that Jesus taught the importance of prayer by word and example. Luke upholds acts of mercy and compassion as modeled by Jesus to be of the very essence of the believer's life. Even more than the other Gospels, Luke's Gospel recognizes the elevated status of women among Jesus' followers. Luke specifically addresses their contributions and names names. Luke emphasizes that Jesus is God's Redeemer for the entire world and not Israel only. The church's mission in the present time, guided by the Spirit, is to bring the saving gospel of Jesus Christ to the ends of the earth. Luke alone presents us with Jesus' parable of the Good Samaritan and of the prodigal son. Luke alone tells us of the manger and the shepherds at Bethlehem. Only Luke tells us the story of the boy Jesus in the temple at the age of 12. The announcement of his birth to Mary by the angel Gabriel. The raising of the widow's son at the town of Nain. His words from the cross to the penitent thief, "Truly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise." More examples of what only Luke provides. In 2001, Luke the Gospel writer made the news. Dr. Guido Barbugiani, an Italian geneticist, announced that a tooth said to be St. Luke's had proved to have the genetic characteristics of ancient people living in the Antioch region. Further, radiocarbon dating indicated the tooth to be within the proper age range to belong to Luke. The tooth was found on the floor of a lead coffin long held to be Luke's. It fit into the correct socket of a skull from Prague, said to be Luke's. That skull fit the topmost neck bone in the coffin. But whether or not these are Luke's remains, there can be no question that Luke was a flesh and blood Christian who gave the world 2 priceless gifts. Luke, the beloved physician, contributor of 1/4 of the New Testament, that you may know the truth of the things that have been accomplished among us.